So welcome everyone, and thanks for having me. So the second half is actually very important: how to develop good software despite management and company culture. And this title is also pretty indicative of what I'm doing here, or what this talk will be like, because this is no business sugarcoating. This is actually very direct and about lots of experience and preparation for the reality of working in the software field, with a bit of satire to help coping, obviously. So to give you people a little overview of what we will be doing today, there will be an introduction and context section where what all this is basically about for like 20 to 30 minutes. Then I will tell you about a lot of specific problems that you can experience as a developer in the workplace and how you can solve them. And then we have a little poll, what we will do next, because there are like two different sections we can do. We can talk a bit more about like general solutions to improve your work situations, or about like a bit scientific patterns like of organizational psychology and social psychology, how companies and people and management work, to understand that better so you can navigate better in that reality. But we won't have time for both, so the poll will be which one you people prefer more. And then we have time for questions, which is 30 minutes is pretty long, but my experience is that with these very practical talks, actually people have lots of questions. And then I have to leave at 15:00, and I really have to leave on time to get my train back to Germany. And my ticket is like fixed on that train, so if I don't get that one, I'm really in trouble. Okay, so that's what the next 2 hours will bring for you. So who am I? Why am I talking about this? So I'm Richard. I'm a scientist, which kind of means I'm still doing my PhD. I started my PhD 9 years ago, and yeah, still do it. That's because I did it in the industry, and I switched back and forth between industry and academia a lot, which is what I wanted. So that's the scientist part, and also like kind of the engineer part. And the failed artist part there is because like I kind of would like to write novels. I did a little bit of poetry slam sometimes, but I never really got the discipline to pull through with it. So like kind of the first two things ate up the last thing. So what am I doing technologically is mostly Linux kernel stuff and like networking software, low-level networking inside the kernel or just above the kernel. BSP, which stands for board support packages, which is usually when you buy a board, some hardware, there comes a customized Linux with it, and that's the BSP, the board support package. I worked at companies which did that, and I have some experience in medical devices. And what I'm currently doing is has a very cool title. It's called staff scientist. That sounds fancy, but as a warning, that's from American companies, and American companies really like to give people fancy titles. What it basically means is they found my PhD thesis or some papers I wrote, and they liked them, and now they're paying me to actually implement my PhD thesis into their project, into their product, which is kind of cool, and I also gave me a team to do it. So that position I currently like. But obviously this talk is a lot about like when management makes your job at a company difficult, how to deal with that. So not all my positions have been that nice, and it's about how to survive in environments and keep having fun at making software. I'm doing this for like 14 years now, and I have some experience with different types of companies, which I think is pretty good for a talk like this. I've worked at like small German businesses with all their troubles. I've also worked at a pretty big US foundation. And so far at one like medium-sized enterprise with 400 people, and they wanted to get more like a big company when I was there and more structured and more formalized, which also brings its trouble, of course. And that was funny, I was at a small company that was just bought by a big company. So they managed to have like the worst of both worlds. They still had all the chaos and that everyone had to do like basically 3 jobs, like in a small company, but they also had all the bureaucracy and all the unnecessary slowing down of a big company. So they really managed to get the worst of both. And I'm also doing some freelancing right now and did before. But this talk will be more about the employee side. So for the people in the online audience and here who are employed, although I think, 60 to 70% is also applicable when you're a freelancer. And then this last line there's like, I'm curious, I like books and I like suffering. I should explain that, whoops, I also will close those. I should explain that suffering part. Okay, you do it, thank you. That means basically, I kind of like to suffer through things and then be proud of me to actually have done it. I think I like that more than avoiding problems. And I also like to talk about suffering or read about suffering. And I mean, in part, this talk is also talking about suffering and thinking about these things. So what's next? So summary, a bit more, what will all this be about? A lot of these things are like the more soft aspects, soft skill aspects of working in software and stuff that I wish someone had told me when I was 20 or when I started working. And I also think schools, at least German schools, are pretty bad at preparing you for work life. And I try to compensate a little bit for that. And the second line I have there is this War and Peace, but for office jobs. What I mean by this is I really mean the Tolstoy War and Peace book. It is kind of good. It does deserve its reputation, but it's also really long. Like I didn't read the full book. I read, I think, the first 150 pages, and then I watched the BBC miniseries, and I can really recommend that one. I think it's 6 episodes or something. And what this is mostly about, like the book is so long because it's the full life story of basically 4 people and they are growing up. And one pattern, like in all 4 stories there, is these people start with lots of idealism and with lots of hope, how they can change things, and they all get kind of crushed by reality. But it's also about how these people go on and not just give up and get resentful, but actually find some moderate idealism or just like find their way in life. And it's still a kind of optimistic lookout how they actually deal with life. And I think in that it's a very valuable book because it kind of teaches you how to deal with disillusionment in ways that most American movies don't teach you. But I think it's kind of necessary in reality. So the miniseries is really recommended. And I kind of would say that this talk is like a modern translation of it for office jobs. And then obviously shortened. And I think, I mean, the title is about developing good software, but I think most of what I will be telling is actually applying to most office job where you work project-based. Like you have a project that has to be finished at this date. Yeah, like this last one, this may be a very German thing. I mean, my experience has mostly been German companies, so I can only tell you about how everything is managed in German companies. I hope that at least 70 or 80% of the problems we have, you also have in Czechia. Which doesn't mean I hope you have problems. I mean, obviously it would be better when you have none, but if you have problems, it would be better if it would be more or less the same, because then I can help you. Yeah, but you will see that soon. And then I also have a reference to SpongeBob image. So this is a picture that some colleague sent me, I think, 3 weeks ago when we talked about something in our work. And he basically said me, I'm that Tadeusz guy there already. And I was like, yeah, I can see myself in there. But to be a bit more serious, I think I'm somewhere in between SpongeBob and Tadeusz. And I also, I think one important thing is, the guy in the middle, SpongeBob, is pretty easy to take advantage of. Like a company that wants a developer that you can give some extra work, and he says, yes, of course, I can do that. That would be him. Like if you give Tadeusz some extra work, he will definitely say, no, really not. he maybe won't directly say fuck everyone, but he will say, I have enough other things to do. So there are some advantages of becoming Tadeusz. It's actually, he's better at saying no and establishing his boundaries. And I kind of want to help you to become something in the middle between those two, because being SpongeBob is not long-term sustainable in reality, I think. And that's also what this talk is about. So yeah, it's a little bit of satire. You might already have noticed that one. But it's not really anti-capitalism. Like there are talks in this direction that go like, capitalism is the problem, and we would all be happy with some. Sometimes they really go like socialism, sometimes they want a co-owned company by everyone, and then everything is good. That's not what I'm doing here. My assumption still is here, you are in the existing system, you are in an existing company, and I want to help you survive inside that company and maybe even keep the fun of developing software. But I'm not a revolutionary here. And this is also not an anti-management talk. Like very often among developers, there is this thinking that without management, everything would be super and great, and we don't need them. But I don't think that is true. Like if you, for example, if you look at projects that are developer managed, the example that I'm thinking of is currently OpenAge. I don't know if some of you know that. There are people that kind of started 15 years ago with the idea of re-implementing the Age of Empires 2, the game engine, and doing it in open source. And then after 1 year, they realized, oh, we don't like Make and we don't like CMake. Then they started their own build system. Then they realized for their calls, they don't like to use Skype. Back then, Skype was the thing. So they started writing their own Skype implementation and started it and never finished it. And then they realized, oh, we also don't like Jenkins. So they wrote their own Jenkins version. And obviously, they never got finished. And I think that's one of the reasons why we kind of unfortunately need management, because many programmers, especially like if you really have some passion for technology, that means often they don't have a passion for finishing things. Because with many projects, there's often this, there are parts that are just not fun. But to actually finish it, you have to make compromises and you have to do the non-fun stuff. And that's what you need managers for, to actually push the developers to do that. So you will always need some kind of management, what I think. So management is not the Antichrist, and they have their permission to exist, in my view. But like one general problem with most management people is, compared to the software people, is they usually can talk better and they can negotiate better and they have more of all these people skills. And also, like if you really are a serious manager and like, especially if you studied business studies at school and then go and do this middle managed path, these people also get courses on how to lead people, and they learn lots of psychological tricks and how to lead strategic communication and stuff that you usually don't. So there is some asymmetry in when you start negotiating with them. And that is a problem, and pretty often programmers can get screwed over with. So that is also something we have to kind of compensate for, which this talk is also about. So what are these sources? I already mentioned my experience in mostly German companies, also 2 American companies so far. And I will also explain a few of the differences between them. And also there are some books on all these things which are pretty good. The first one is called peopleware. That has this fundamental assumption that basically making software is mostly about people making software and all their social interaction. And actually how well a software project goes or not, or if it fails or not, it's mostly about managing the people. And I think this guy is right. I don't agree with this book in a few ways because it's like very American. They have this idea that you always have to super motivate your employees and it's all about passion and like people, they kind of want people to always pretend to be super passionate about the project and always talk about how much everyone loves the project. And I think that's kind of unrealistic because like if you're doing, I don't know, some business insurance stuff in COBOL on IBM mainframes, no one is passionate about that. People do that for money and not for passion. And just what I said, there are lots of parts in software development that you just have to do. Also like support, interacting with customers. Most developers are not very passionate about that. And I don't think that this American view really helps with this part of reality. So that's why I also read other books and also recommend other books. The second one is called 55 Facts and Fallacies About Software Engineering, I think. And that's the best one of the four. Like if you only get one of these four books, I would really recommend the second one. Because that's from a guy, I think he first studied, then he worked in the field for 20 years, and then he went back to university to study all like really the craft of making software. And he documented like 55 facts of what he observed. And there are like 15 technical ones, which are super interesting. Like one of them is that code reviews really are really helpful. But there are only also like 10 or 15 about management. And those are super interesting and I think really help if you work in that field. Then there's another book called Why is Software So Expensive? That's, I think, from the same guy like the first book. And what is interesting about this one is it seems to have always been the case. Like this book is from the 80s, and even in the 80s, it was the case that most software projects were overtime and most software projects were late. And most managers were telling their programmers, we really have to finish our product and hurry up, please. So it has always been like that. And he kind of formulates the idea that maybe that's on purpose. Like maybe the managers already know when they start planning that they won't make it in time, but they kind of assume that the programmers will work faster if there is this heavy time pressure. And it's pretty interesting. I don't want to spoil too much of this book, but this has also been an influence. And the fourth one is more like a bit more academic, making software, what really works and why we believe it. That is about, basically what the title says is like many papers of empiric researching how software engineering works. There's also this, how much, for example, does test-driven development really benefit us? Or they also have like one paper that I found super interesting about this whole, how good is Agile really and how much does Scrum really help us? And just to summarize it, they got to the conclusion that for projects that are actually important, like hard-pacing machines or military helicopters, it's actually a good idea to do design first and then do the coding. So they get to the conclusion that Scrum is not really usable everywhere, and it's only really applicable in areas where you can do big changes later easily, which is good to have that study ready when someone wants to Scrum your embedded project, I guess. Okay, so limitation. Many of the things that I will tell you in the next hour are my way of doing things. Like, they've worked pretty well for me, but from talking to other people, I kind of know that maybe they might be too confrontational for the average person. But also regarding that, I think most of the things I say can also be delivered softer or are softenable. And one thing about this whole communication stuff I learned was it's good when you are like very hard in your content and in your position, what you want or what you negotiate, but soft in the human interaction. And that is actually separatable. And the softening will be your part then, so to say. So what do we have next? Oh yeah, I have to make one admittance about the title. So I did call it How to Build Good Software Despite Management. But actually my main goal is more about your personal happiness and about your mental health while working in software and how to keep actually some fun in the work. And the good software is only like a byproduct, but I called it like that because the title is catchier. So that as a little information. Okay, so what do I mean when I say German company culture? Because that was in the other part of the title. I realized that many German companies really like to treat their employees like babies. And to give you one concrete example that was so great is this one. So what this actually means is how to walk securely for administrative jobs. And that's like an actual course that employers can book for their employees. And I think it's 50 euros per employee. And that's a real thing. And employees really buy these courses where they teach their employees how to walk. And yeah, that's wild. And like, I also once experienced something like that at a company where when I wanted to work from home, because they promised me I can do that. And to work from home, they gave me like a document that had 4 pages, and it started with, we try to avoid unnecessary bureaucracy. And then like 4 pages of stuff about how to work from home. And like what was really interesting was like on page 2, they did explain how to sit properly. Because they kind of assume that I don't know how to sit at my desk in a way without health problems or long-term health things. And when I asked them why, or was a bit like joking about it, they told me that the German employer is responsible for like keeping his employees super duper safe. And that includes how to sit properly and that stuff. And it's also kind of ironic because at that point, like they did trust me to maintain the Linux kernel of that specific company, but they did not trust me how to sit properly, which is kind of weird. But that is in many ways, and very often that means that you might get pretty limited into your possibility to do things when they treat you like that, which is one problem if you are a regular employee. But it varies obviously from company, but there are always these bureaucratic stones in your way, or very often. Another pretty common problem in German companies is what I call classical engineering. Like often when you have people who started in that company like 30 years ago and they were like mechanical engineers or electrical engineers, and they kind of worked their way up, and now they are department leads, department managers, and they manage software products, but they have never written software really themselves. But for some reasons, because these people are successful and are in a high position, these people still think they know about software, and they make decisions about software products, which might be frustrating or which might be a bit difficult to work with. I've realized that in German companies that happens a lot because we have this tradition of German engineering, and very often those engineers are not computer people, but they kind of lead computer projects. I hope in Czechia it's not that bad for you, I don't know. Is it? Mixed. Okay. But yeah, that's one problem I often require, that there is a mismatch. And often, unfortunately, the older people have more negotiation power, which is also like the no understanding of software culture comes together with this. And yeah, also this, it's just software is like this. So like, yeah, it's easy. You can do it just like that and that, but you can't really. Also, I feel like German companies very much like this thinking in boxes and in positions. So like, they have this idea you just need one person for this specific task, but they don't really understand that tasks might change over time. And also like how different people are in their skills. Like there are these terms of like the 5x programmers or the 0.5x programmer. So we will get to that later. There's lots of statistics that actually even in small teams, the output of programmers really differs a lot. We don't really know why, but like differences in productivity of factor 5 are pretty common. Like in small companies, you have difference in factor 5, and in bigger companies, sometimes you can see factors to 23. And it seems to be in part intelligence, part motivation. Sometimes it's also stuff like people work a lot more efficient when they are not called all the time, when they actually have silence to focus. That might also make a big difference. But these huge differences in productivity is also something, I think that's very specific to software, because people seem to not really understand it often, or like especially my experience, these classical engineering people. And also, yeah, let's just fix that quickly in software. The problem is like, when you do that 20 times, you have horrible software and horrible code. So it's not very sustainable. Yeah. What else do I mean by Germany company culture? Oh, we don't talk about problems. That's something I experienced a lot. And I think that's actually international. That's also very often, yeah, in American companies. Like you have a problem that's actually pretty severe, but no one likes to talk about it and kind of pretend it's fine. And then when the whole project is crashed against the wall, you kind of pretend it never happened. Obviously, this is bad because when you do not talk about a problem, you cannot solve it. You cannot do anything about it. And you cannot learn from it. And it might be pretty frustrating when you're the person who actually wants to solve the problem or wants to do it right. Harmony and peace is more important than output is something that I also encountered quite a lot. Like especially this is more in the bigger companies, that you have managers that their main job is like conflict avoidance, and the problem is solving problems would cause conflict, and we don't want that, so we kind of avoid solving problems. Yeah, and that tilt towards safety and conservatism is, I think, also something that's quite international. I do know that it's very common in Japanese companies, like they still use fax. What's fax in? I have no idea what this is in English. But yeah, that's unfortunately pretty everywhere. Yeah, and then this democracy simulation. I think that's actually better in Czechia from what I talked to people yesterday. But German companies are like, they really like to pretend. We have lots of meetings. The input from everyone is important. But it's not really. They just pretend that it's like that. And one thing that I realized that I think my mom told once, where they had one, like she works in medicine, which is of course different. Medicine is a bit more hierarchical. But they had this big meetings where also the professor, doctor was of the whole department was there. And they said, yeah, they talk a lot, they negotiate a lot. And in the end, we always do what the professor says. And she was like, yeah, but like, why do we have these 2-hour meetings when it's like kind of already decided what will happen? But for some reason, companies really like to do this democracy simulation, which also, I mean, I found it frustrating. Maybe some of you do. So the preparation here, it's really just simulation. You should never think it's actual democracy. Companies are always kingdoms with a hierarchy, and it's just paint, the democracy. Some of the root causes of these things. I already had mentioned that with the SpongeBob thing. Programmers often bring idealism and motivation with them, and that's something you can take advantage of. And I think it's also a good example that it's worse with the fields that have more idealism in it. Like, usually the worst work conditions you have in game development. And game development is a field where people are super motivated. So you can do that. Like, you don't have that, I mentioned that before, with COBOL for mainframes. People there are very aware that no one wants to do it, and they are in a pretty good negotiation position. So there you don't have that, but unfortunately that's the thing. And I think that's also something for you and also for the online audience. I think sooner or later you have to realize at the moments you get money for it, it's work. And idealism, it's nice when you also have fun at your job, but you should never forget, overall, it's about responsibility and about delivering things and not so much about your idealism. Like, my general advice that will be later is work is pretty good at destroying passion, and you should always be careful with that and kind of keep your passion more in your private open source projects, actually. At least that's my advice, but we will talk more about this. You need managers that we had already. Ideals and reality gauss distribution. So you all know that curve. So one problem you will often encounter is like how companies pretend to be is here, but how they actually are is more like here. Like, when the x-axis is like how good is the company, and the y-axis is like how many of them are. Like, the reality, most things are here, but unfortunately your expectation is usually that. So you will very often after a few years realize things are not as good. And I kind of want to prepare you for that. And I mean, to some degree, this goes for how the company describes itself, but it also goes for, this is how fast you think you will be. Like, when you ask people, this task, this ticket, how long will you take to implement it? This is how fast you think you will be. This is how fast you actually will be. Like, reality brings lots of little pitfalls with them. And it's kind of good to, when you already go more into this Thaddeus mode, so more into this manage your expectations, you get disappointed less. Like, when you start with your expectations here or even here, you get no disappointed, and maybe you get even sometimes a positive surprise. So that's one thing I wanted to give you. And like a bit of overview of all the mitigations I will give you. Like, they're partly like inner measures, like how will you deal with the stuff that happens. They are part more negotiation. Like, I mentioned that word a lot. Like, a lot of these things is communication and negotiation with people. So becoming better at that will really help you. And they are partly also bigger steps. You will see more of them later. Okay, so now we have the context and the arena more or less defined. And now I will talk about a lot of specific problems you might encounter and how to solve them. I did start with a very, very common one, like time pressure. Like, you're in a company and you feel like what they tell you to do is extremely stressful and there's lots of time pressure. How to deal with that? And I already kind of mentioned this in this Why is Software So Expensive book. And what is extremely interesting about this is when you look for statistics, it's actually that 70% of all software projects fail. So when your project is over time and your manager is telling you, oh, this is horrible, this is costing us so much money, we should be done 3 months already, that's normal. Then you are in the average software project. And usually, I would also add, it's not your fault. Usually, such schedule problems are something that the management fucked up, and not you. Oh, Actually, survey, yeah. I did want to ask the audience. That was actually a part I was looking much forward the most to. So who of you has ever been in a software project where like the time estimation was done by the management and it was finished on time? Okay, one guy, that's more than I expected, but yeah, cool. Okay, who has been in a...
It was because managers are actually asking us.
Oh, okay. So he said it was in this case because the managers actually asked the developers, which is good, sounds like a good company. That helps. That actually would have been my next question. So who of you has been in a project where management has, like, with developers, or at least with the team leads of the developers, talked about the technical stuff and then made an estimation, and this estimation was correct? Okay, you want, but still, okay, that's hard. Okay, like, okay, who was in a project and they talked with everyone and the project then took double the time than estimated? Yeah, now most hands go up, which is kind of interesting. Okay, who was in a project that took 3 times as long as estimated? Yeah, okay. And who was or is in a project that is still not finished up to this time? Also a lot of hands go up. So yeah, I think for everyone in the room, this is kind of interesting to have this comparison. It's pretty normal. And also 2 funny anecdotes about that. The first one is I once was at a project where they made the huge mistake. It was a kind of bigger hardware project with lots of software. They put a year number into the name of the project. And they put 2018 into it, and they started in 2012, and they're still not finished with it, by the way. So, like, never do that, like, for the managers. Never put a year into this. And the second anecdote about this, there's also, for the people who, like, maybe sometimes watch German news, we have Stuttgart 21, Stuttgart 21 in Germany. So that's, I think, a train station. And they called it like, that's in the city of Stuttgart, and they called it like that because I think originally they wanted to finish it in 2021. Now we have 2026, it's not finished yet. And I think at some point they said, when they had not finished it, they first said, oh, we will finish it 2024. Then they said, we will finish it 2026. And just a few months ago, they said, okay, we will finish it in the 21st century. Which is hilarious. So yeah, stuff like that happens. And especially when you are young as a developer, this can really stress you and this can really make you sleepless. And it just, it takes some time until you realize, no, you shouldn't let yourself stress like that because it's not like your job is in danger. Like, they already have the problem of finishing the project, they won't fire you. Because when they fire you, they have even more problems and they will have even harder times to finish it. So you are pretty safe. Like, your managers or your boss might create lots of stress because sometimes they have their own stress with it, and when they are bad managers, they just give this stress to other people, which is not nice and not good. And sometimes they really think you're lazy and you will only work better when they stress you, which is also pretty shitty management. But you can ignore that. Like, of course, you have to say, I will give my best, of course. But you can also, especially when you are kind of early in the project, say, sorry, boss, I think this is unrealistic. I will do my best to keep this deadline, but in my humble opinion, it's a bit unrealistic. And 2 other things I want to say, like, one is don't fudge it. Like, your managers might want you to fudge this for, like, doing bad work, just wriggling it together somehow, that it somehow works, and don't do that. It's kind of difficult to keep your quality standards, but my recommendation is really keep it clean, because if you fudge it, you will regret it sooner or later. And everyone in the company who has to work with this code will regret it. And as said, you're actually kind of safe. So it is better to not fudge, or like in German, it's called pushen. I had to look for a translation. The other word is moonlight. So yeah, don't do bad work. It's never a good idea. And yeah, the last one is let it crash and burn. Like the problem is when management creates an unrealistic deadline and then everyone in the team is working very, very hard to somehow keep this deadline with working on weekends, working on Sunday, working during nights. The signal what you're giving to management by this is, yeah, you can treat us like that. It works. You get it. You can push us and we will let ourselves be pushed and you get your project. So their learning is, we can do this again. And that's why it's so important to not keep deadlines. That's why it's so important to let it crash and burn. When they make unrealistic deadlines, they will have to suffer and they should suffer for it. And you should not be the one who compensates for this. And yeah, your jobs are pretty safe. And also in Germany, it's really difficult to fire people, especially for stuff like that. So it's better to let it crash and burn. Okay, yeah, bad decisions, how to deal with that. To some degree, you just have to accept those. You can diplomatically talk to your management in private, never in front of the whole company or the whole team, that you think maybe this might not work. Actually, if you have a moderately okay boss and if you're kind of respectful in addressing it, usually that can work pretty well. But it's also kind of important to realize the boundaries. Like you can change some things. It also depends a lot on how long you are in the company. Like the longer you are there, the better you networked, the more you can change. Actually, this is what I just said is way more important than facts. Like you might be super convinced that Rust might be the best thing for this thing, or library XYZ might be the best. But even if it's true, this doesn't really matter. Networking and all the social stuff is way more important, actually. No understanding of technical debt. They want you to fudge. We already had that. Yeah, don't. Actually, I realized, like in part, there is the talking side, like how open you actually communicate it, and then what you do yourself. But also, like what I'm currently thinking of is like in code reviews, like you have to review code from someone and it's just really bad. And I tend to be pretty stubborn about this. Maybe you cannot always do this, like stubborn as in, no, you have to fix that. No, you have to document that properly. No, you have to use that API properly. The thing is, you can maybe improve stuff a bit, but there are usually boundaries, like also depending usually on your social capital, how long you are in that company. So maybe there the way is also to accept you can improve things a bit, but with limits. But that's about the reviews. About your own stuff, I would kind of keep my my standards. And also, I mean, usually if you say people, yeah, if you do it wrong, you will do it 2, 3, or 4 times and have to fix it again and again, and overall that costs more time. That's a pretty good argument. Usually that works. If the whole company really has a really bad quality culture, and that's something that really stresses you because you're a person who wants to do things well, this might also be a reason to leave and change the company. And we will talk a bit more about leaving and quitting more later. But for the short thing, like if you are strategic about it, and if you have LinkedIn and you are already aware of other opportunities, threatening to quit or quitting can be a pretty good solution. Like I've quit jobs like I think 3 times now, and every time it has become better for me. Like actually in the software industry, we are usually in that lucky position that quitting and changing jobs is pretty easy for us. And I've heard that, like, for a long time, it was very easy to get a job in IT. I've heard that in the last years, it became a little bit more difficult, but that is usually mostly for people fresh from university for their first job, where like no one really knows how good they are. When you already have a few years of work experience, it's pretty easy usually. And also with that, we'll come more with that, but short, like you shouldn't quit your job every year. Like usually, like, but if you stay 3 years at a company, then it's okay to quit. And that's still fine in your CV to change companies every 3 or 4 years. Yeah. Okay, excessive micromanagement. Yeah, that's something companies do. How do you deal with that? Like, in part, you can always politely resist it. Like, when the boss that is trying to micromanage you a lot is always knowing he has to kind of do a little fight with you whenever he wants to micromanage with you. And the result will always be that you actually did it well. And it kind of shows up that his micromanagement was unnecessary. Then he will do it less, because it's also kind of suffering for him. Like, in general, one way for all these things is to push back in like a diplomatic and polite way. So the things that are bad for you also get unpleasant for management, so they will do it less. Which we will see in many points here. So this diplomatic pushing back is also pretty important. Toxic environment. Yeah, it depends on how toxic. Like, sometimes you can avoid it, like maybe by working from home. When toxic environments means that people are like very, very passive-aggressive in their emails, what I do usually is call it out, like directly ask them, what do you mean by this? Does this mean X, Y, Z? Should I assume this? This is also, again, this diplomatic pushing back, because I realized just accepting stuff that is toxic or that you don't like, if you do that for a long time, it makes you unhappy, and it really makes your job and your life less good. So I think it's better, yeah, to learn to push back in ways that are still professional. And yeah, leaving is also an option, depending on how bad it is. I think this one, when it's really bad, it's okay to leave. You are not allowed to do it perfect. That's something I had to struggle with in like the first few years, and I know some people do. This might actually be a consequence of good management, because yeah, in reality, in many fields, you do not need perfect software. You need software that is good enough. Like, extreme example, like a web development. If you have some animations on a website, that website might get changed again in 2 or 3 years anyways. So there's not that much reason to do it perfect. And very often, like especially people starting, have their own quality standards, which might be way higher than those of the company. And yeah, this is my answer. Yeah, you should actually grow up or accept this. So you're doing software for money. They give you money, so it's also okay to do it to their quality standards. And it's actually kind of helpful to learn to do things just good enough and not perfect. Yeah. You're not allowed to code it in Haskell. Yeah, there my answer is, yeah, deal with it. Because like, again, they give you money. It's like kind of their time. It's okay when they want it in C or C++ or even Python or I don't know. So yeah, that's what I said also about idealism in the beginning. You're doing software for money, so you have to be pragmatic. You cannot do it in your favorite language, and that's okay. And that's something you will have to accept, yeah. Management cares for results, not for your fun. Yeah, also deal with it. That's why they give you money. You can always have fun in your free time, but when they give you money, you have to accept that they want results. That's only fair. Management thinks too short term. Yeah, that's a difficult one. They very often do. And I think one of the problems with the whole technical depth thing is like, many people in management, like the classical engineers, but also like people who come from business studies and so, they really don't know what you are doing. for them, it's all just magic, basically. And the problem is they talk to lots of different people, like different software people that tell them very different things. And now you come around and tell them something about technical debt. How should they know that you're not bullshitting them? Because the 5 people before them never talked about technical debt. And they kind of know that every developer with the stuff that he tells them always has his own interest and his own perspectives. So they are, rightly so, a bit skeptical about the things they tell you, you tell them. So like, how should they know that technical debt now is a real thing and you're not just lazy and you're not just wanting more time for some of your personal pet project? So it's kind of, in a way, understandable that they don't understand. My solution there usually is like to explain stuff with examples, with other projects, how that worked out there, or to go like a middle way, to still do it somehow good, and to compromise, which also works. Yeah, but you might have to compromise there. Dishonesty, yeah, that's unfortunate and very common. I think you cannot really do anything about that. You can be honest yourself, and especially if you're longer in the company and know people, you might very often get to know the facts behind the official truth. But apart from that, I think you kind of have to accept, I also think that's more in American and German companies and not so much in Czech, that very often they don't tell you the full story. And it's just, it is what it is. You are the 5x programmer. So I mentioned that before, that there are huge productivity difference. My recommendation when you are the 5x programmer is chill. Like, it's not really worth it to push super hard. Actually, it might make you a bit unliked. Maybe people like you a bit less if you are, especially if you are bragging about it. Like, you should be, humility is a virtue. And maybe use the more time you have to learn other things, or to just enjoy your time there. But it's not like you get anything from pushing super fast. Also, something that might be related to this, some people of you might know the Peter principle. That's a law in management theory that says good people are promoted again and again so long until they end up in a position where they are no longer good, where they are no longer competent. And the thing is, usually you get promoted for the stuff in your previous job, which is not necessarily indicative of what you will do in your new job. Like, especially if you are a very good programmer, this does not mean you are a good manager. And maybe they should not promote you. And it might be when you are a 5x programmer that they might promote you to a team lead. And you should know beforehand that this is a very different job, a team lead, and needs a lot more social skills, a lot more communication. And if you don't like that, then don't take the promotion. That's also kind of important there. You are the 0.5x programmer, and that also happens. I think in that case, my recommendation would be just stay very silent, be careful that no one detects you, and it's also possible to kind of make the things you do look bigger than it actually is. These people usually, if they are kind of well-liked and silent is not the wrong, not creating any trouble, they can stay in companies pretty long. Like, it only gets dangerous once you get like below 0.3x, then people might detect it. Tests and builds take forever. I don't think that is a problem. Like, usually there are lots of emails to answer, lots of documentation to write. That's something you can do in there. Like you can also make building faster by making stuff more modular or optimizing things. You can separate like optimized builds from testing builds that are just optimized or stuff. But I kind of like the forced breaks this gives me. Everyone else is also doing extra job overtime. Be a team player. This is a very manipulative communication strategy that people sometimes use, or management sometimes use. I only had to hear that once. What I then usually ask back is like, yeah, the company could also be a team player. The company could also care for my free time, actually, which usually works. This also, like, when you're starting, when you're 20, it's pretty difficult to talk back or to push back against these things. But the thing is, it works. Like, usually they don't expect you to push back. And when you do, they are not good at dealing with it. Permanent firefighting, no sustainability. This is more common in small companies, and the firefighting means quick fixes for stuff that goes wrong. This is especially happening when your company is not only doing software development, but also operations, system administration stuff for customers. Yeah, you can try that when you did some firefighting successfully, that you stay an hour longer on that server and also fix things in a long-term way. Usually, if you also do this inside of the firefighting context, people let you do that, let you actually fix it sustainably. And also there, yeah, talking about it, like if you are like professional and make a good argument, people might actually understand it. And yeah, what's this, preemptive? Like preparation is usually way more efficient than firefighting. Yeah, we already had that one. I won't explain that one too much. Oh, everyone has to love the product and the company. USA. That is a lot more common in American companies, that they do a lot of internal marketing and make you like, everyone has to pretend to really like it, which is annoying. But all things considered, it's one of the less bad things, so just accept it. Usually, if you always do the bare minimum of internal hype, that's something where you can get along. There are sometimes a way more toxic form of this, like I once, for a short term, worked at a company where they asked me for my Twitter account, and fortunately I didn't have one. And the thing is, if I would have one, they would ask me to post company adverts with my private Twitter account, because that's kind of what American companies want from their employees, that you transfer your deep passion for their insurance product out into the world. Yeah, I would just say run if you encounter such a company. Fortunately, it was only that one, and I had no Twitter, so I got around that, but sometimes they exist. But that's a very American thing. Startup mentality. I mean, that's maybe a subjective thing. Some people might like working at startups. I don't, because startups are also very good at crossing boundaries and not really respecting your free time, your private time, and expecting a lot of this passion for everything. Maybe if you are the founder of the startup, especially, then that's fine for you. If you just want a plannable job and a plannable life, I think you actually can establish boundaries, especially in Germany, because in Germany we have a really strong culture of the separation of work time and private time. And actually, when you talk about this, and we have very strict laws regarding this, your startup boss will accept that pretty quickly, because he knows in every work law he would lose, actually. The maid of all work. I had to look that up. Like in German, that was Mädchen für alles. That's like basically when you are the girl for everything at your company and doing lots of stuff everywhere. It's pretty easy to get into that role, especially if you're a nice person and you want to help and you want stuff to just work quickly. But it's pretty bad. Like, it's bad for your career. Like, if you're kind of good at everything, that means you're really good at nothing. And for your career, it's usually way better to specialize in something than to kind of do everything. So my advice there would be don't be that person. Try to specialize as much as you can. Because when you specialize in something, you get a way lot better than other people who do just a bit everywhere. And that means way higher salaries. Especially with remote work, you can, when you specialize in something and you have the whole world open, it's pretty easy to find new stuff. So my recommendation would always be to specialize. Bureaucracy. Yeah, we have a lot of that in Germany. But I think overall, like of all the things I've mentioned so far, I think bureaucracy is one of the less bad ones. Because slowing things down also means, again, you get more time to do other things. It can be annoying. Sometimes it's a solution to just do the thing. Sometimes it's also very helpful to ignore bureaucracy and just do things outside bureaucracy. And this might also work very well. So how to exactly deal with it depends a lot on the specific type of bureaucracy and of the company culture. But you can weasel around often. Permanent internal marketing, it's kind of the same what I just told about Twitter and the everyone has to like the project, so that's covered already. Team building events and silly social worker tasks. I mean, that's also kind of subjective. I never liked team building events. I always had this very personal separation, like that private life and work life. And I mean, there's a reason. Like in German, we have the word Freund, and we have the word Kollege. And the other English, like friend and colleague. And I mean, there's a reason why this is two different words. And I mean, I kind of accept that I have to pretend to like people I work with, but I always have to see this as part of the job. And I don't really like social events. I'm actually team building events. And also, like for you, especially if you already switched your job 1 or 2 times, like of how many of the people from your previous company are you still friends with? If you think this through, it's usually 0 or 1. And I'm pretty sure that one person you would also have become friends with without team building events. So yeah, I kind of think they are kind of insulting, because I think team building events basically says you wouldn't work together with this person without this event, because you don't have enough structure or discipline. You sometimes have to go there. It's also okay. My experience to only go to every second event and not to everyone. So, funnily enough, legally in Germany, they are not allowed to force you to go there. Like, they are only allowed to force you to go there if it's work time. If it's your free time, you can always say no. But I wouldn't advise you to always say no. That also makes a very bad impression. But like saying no in 50% of the cases might be good. No understanding of part-time. That's also something because I really like to work part-time. There's also lots of studies, like I think Microsoft Japan did this, that they just did not work on Fridays. Like on Friday, office was closed and no one came in. And funny thing was, productivity was the same. There was no real difference. Like they did save a bit of money on power and lights and everything and cleaning, but it did not do much of a productivity impact. And same, I think Stockholm did a study once where everyone just could go home 1 hour earlier in several companies in Stockholm. And then after a year, they checked if the productivity is different, and it wasn't. It was kind of the same. And I think the reason for this is because people are already at that limit. Like my personal experience is when I have to really focus on like mental work, I cannot do that really for 8 hours. I can do that for 6 hours maybe, or 5, but all the more hours are kind of wasted time. That's one of the reasons why I'm a huge fan of part-time. Unfortunately, most German companies are not, or they have not really come to this conclusion. So how do you still get part-time? Like what I did, what they always accepted is like this, I have to write my PhD thesis, that they kind of accepted. But of course, that's not something everyone can do. One possibility would be like to be just very strict about this from the beginning and say, yeah, period. That are my conditions to work here. Either you give me that or you don't. Maybe you can also tell them you have some project in your free time. It really depends on the company. Like I kind of prefer companies who are more modern there. But this might be something you will have to accept, that not all companies are modern there. Okay, what do we have next? Too little communication. Yeah, that's pretty common, unfortunately, because I already mentioned like we are introverts and many developers do not like to communicate, but also communication is unfortunately super important for this work. The only thing you can really do if it's about colleagues or management is like ask people a lot and initiate communication from your side. Usually people are pretty cooperative. It's really, I think, mostly a thing of initiative. But when you bring initiative, that usually solves a lot. Too much communication. Like there are so companies that really like to do lots of meetings. What can you do against that? I mean, you can you can usually ask for like to be not take part in individual meetings because you have to do so and so much to do there and there and there. And you can maybe friendly ask not to be included in this meeting also. And usually this works pretty well, so you can slowly weasel yourself out of too many meetings. Too much Scrum. I mean, this is obviously an opinion thing. I don't like Scrum. And I think it's possible to over-Scrum things, and sometimes there are Scrum Master which really like to put everything into boxes. And the thing is, some projects, and I'm specifically more talking about embedded stuff, are just not good Scrummable. I think the best solution there is like to pretend to be Scrum, to do Scrum and kind of Scrumify your stuff on the outside while not really doing Scrum. That's usually better than trying to fight Scrum in general, because it's just so popular you cannot win this fight. Too little Scrum. I mean, I don't think that's a problem, but if you are the person who wants more Scrum, talk to people about it. Usually management likes Scrum. And like, there are lots of talking points why Scrum is pretty popular, and just alone mentioning that it's kind of common everywhere might convince your management to like Scrum. But then you will very likely also have to be the person that actually does the Scrum mastering. So only if you really want to walk the walk and talk the talk. No understanding of how much work software is. We kind of had that. What you can do here to like kind of help people is to really go through with them. Like if someone says, this example will come later, but I think it's good enough to bring that here already. Like for example, your boss comes to you and tells you, I want a program that copies files. That's easy, right? You can do that in one day. It's just file copying. If you then go with them through the process of all the details of that would help. Like then you ask them, should it also copy folders? Like are files folders for you? Are folders files for you? Then what should we do if the file already exists? What should we do if the file in the destination already exists but has a newer date? Does the file copying have to do a progress bar? How accurate has the progress bar to be? Should we support moving from different file systems? Should we include hard links and symlinks? What should we do if the file to copy is a symlink? And then very early people will see, okay, actually stuff is more complicated and there's a lot to decide, even for such simple things as copying files. Because the thing is, yeah, developing software is actually fucking difficult. And one reason why all the stuff takes so much longer is because the stuff is always more difficult than we think. And usually these difficulties only pop up once we're in the project. But already talking about these things beforehand and asking all these questions can help understanding other people. Okay, the stuff is difficult. But also there, you always have to be professional and friendly, but also very firm in your actual stance that there's lots of stuff to go right, to go wrong, or that you have to think of. And usually you can get people there to understand that it's actually more complicated than that. Or you can also ask them how it went in the past when they said this will be easy and this will be easy, how much harder it was then. And like, funnily, there are lots of managers who don't really learn from the past, but if you really make them think about their past 10 years and force them to learn from the past, that sometimes works. We already had this one. Lots of old and shitty code, that's also very common for most of you. I'm usually, like, how do you solve this? Like, a lot of people kind of like to throw everything away and start anew. But then you have the problem, you have to create a new implementation in very short time, very quickly. And very likely it will have a lot of the whole problems that the old code also had. And you will also encounter lots of the bugs, will include lots of the bug fixes that will also make your code ugly. And it's very likely that in 1 year or 2, you will end up with kind of the same problem again. So I'm not that big a fan of rewriting, and I don't think just because you are another person or you use another programming language that this will automatically make it better. So I usually recommend the saner way is really understanding the old thing and cleaning that up. This sounds unfun. It's obviously more fun to rewrite it, but my general recommendation is still, for the reasons I just told, cleaning it up is usually still faster, and you keep all the bug fixes for special cases that are in there but undocumented, but actually super important for this customer in Australia and stuff like that. Horrible libraries and technologies. To some degrees, you can change libraries when the APIs are actually nice. And very often you can also, you have a big piece of software that was created, that's monolithic and was created for some specific customers. And it has some features that you do not need anymore. When that's the case, either because some customer has died or is no longer there, or because your stuff did, I don't know, support old modems or a point-to-point protocol over Ethernet or something like that, but you don't need that anymore, then you can throw that out, which is pretty nice. And you should do that, like making stuff leaner is always nice. But completely switching is usually difficult. And just as I mentioned, if you make a big transitions, it won't be as easy as you think. Yeah, good. Stupid metrics. Oh. What I mean by stupid metrics is like this. Amazon did that once, that when people call Amazon support, their workers, they are promoted and paid by the amount of customer calls they take per day, which meant they very often just take a call and then lay down the phone again, because that also did count as a separate call. Or they don't really help the people and just send them elsewhere or something, which obviously is horrible customer support. So the whole product really went a lot worse. But the metrics did all say, oh, we do great customer support. We have so many calls per day. That's why I call this metrics stupid, because many of them actually make the product worse. Or also if you start paying developers by commits amount or by lines of code. Like this sounds stupid, but actually Elon Musk proposed something like that, I think a week ago. He said that he will fire all the programmers that write less than 1,000 lines of code per month or something like that. And that's obviously horrible. And yeah, I said there run. I mean, it depends if they really seriously force this very quick. That would also be something that like endure it for 1 or 2 months and look for a new job in that time and then switch as quickly as possible. Because if it's a big company and these metrics are company-wide, you might not be able to do something about it. Yeah. Or I don't know, if you fire all the people who, if you do it based on Jira tickets, if you fire the people who solved less than 10 Jira tickets per month, that would also be something. Because obviously you can work around that and just make tickets for smaller things, which might be some way to survive, but I think it's no good solution and no long-term solution. But yeah, fortunately, they are pretty rare. Like these 2 examples that I just told are the only 2 examples that I know, and I never experienced it myself, actually. Stupid time registration. Like, I once worked at a company where we had to like do time accounting, time registration for work time in like 3 different systems at the same time. Like one for the actual time, then one where we had to register like on which project we work, which time, and then another one which was per ticket, which, yeah, just lots of extra time, but I think this is stuff you just will have to endure. Fortunately, the 3 times is really rare. Most companies only do double accounting. It's rarely that they do triple. Too little home office. Yeah, you can constantly like argue a little bit. There are lots of statistics that developers are actually more productive in home office. If the company really is not cooperative, this might, yeah, it depends on how much it also buffers you, but this might also be a solution to like at this look at other companies that might be more chill there. Too much home office, yeah, I don't think there can be too much. But if you are the person who actually likes to be at an office, usually you can go there. The companies do not hinder you at that. And usually you might also be able to get your, like the closer friends you have at work to maybe meet every Tuesday and also have brunch or have lunch together or stuff. So it's also just a question of initiative. You can organize that when you want. Unqualified colleagues. Yeah, this can be annoying. Like this is also like I think more when you start work and you are someone who like cares a lot about doing stuff well, and then you have colleagues who just don't or are just like bad, and it's kind of frustrating to work with them. Yeah, but I think you cannot really do anything against that. Like, at least in German companies, there is this, people don't really talk about performance openly. So you're kind of have to deal with that. I think it's not really something that's affecting you directly. So it's better to accept that. Code reviews. Okay, I like code reviews. Honestly, I don't know why I included them there. maybe it's for people who don't like them. Maybe it was this how to do this in a professional way. Like what I usually do is I don't push too hard. Like obviously people have very different views regarding code quality. And you might have to review code from people that is really sloppy. My usual approach is like to more ask questions and give recommendations. So like, why is that here? Could you document that? Or I think it would be cleaner to do it like this and this and this. Because usually you are not in a position to like give direct, do this. And even if you are, you shouldn't, because in Office it's always a bit more soft. So usually with doing the soft and respectful, you get a lot. And yeah, if people really don't want to do something cleanly or really resist, I would actually recommend more to accept this. So there's one general principle. I think we won't get to that, so I will cover that now quickly. It's actually, I think, a prayer from Ireland. I think it was something like, God, please give me the strength to change what I can change, the power to endure what I cannot change, and the wisdom to tell one apart from the other. And that's pretty important to find happiness in the workplace, to know what you can change and what you cannot change. And the thing is, you generally cannot change other people. And if other people write bad code, you cannot do so much. You can like slowly make it better with every code review, but you will have to accept that you cannot get it perfect on the first merge request. Which sounds like a pretty good ending, but we still have a bit more. Okay, no code reviews. That's a bit bigger problem. So I think actually code reviews are a good thing. If there are none, you can try to convince first your colleagues and then your boss, like first your closest colleagues, then more, and then your boss, to actually do them. I think they're worth it. So what next? Too little management. That's a difficult one, because one solution to too little management and too little communication and everyone is just doing something, like this OpenH example at the beginning, would be that, I mean, someone has to do it, but then it's who? And the problem is when you do the management, this might be a problem because you have to do your coding work, and doing the management then is like, basically you start doing an extra job which you have never been assigned and which you are not paid for. And your colleagues might not be too happy about this, that you try to pretend to play manager. So it's not a good idea when you try that. So the solutions then are maybe ask in a company, like ask your boss and say, yeah, maybe this could be more structured. Maybe we could do weekly meetings. And usually, like, this is often a problem in very small companies, what I'm describing here. And usually they are pretty open to that and might give you this title officially, then it's fine. But this might also be something that either you just have to accept, or leave. Like if you are the company, the person who really likes super strict, everything is very structured, then maybe you are the person who should work at a big company. Too much management, work at a smaller company. That was easy. Too many meetings. I think we had that already? Okay, sorry, then might be a bit unstructured. They want to give you extra work. That's where it comes in really handy when you are more of the Tadeus, actually. And companies sometimes do that. Like you have your regular role and you're pretty filled out with that. And then they say, oh, we have this new employee, this junior, and oh, we have the student here. Don't you want to train the student also? And you can say there very early, yeah, but then some of my other things will, in German we say liegen bleiben, just lays there and will not get done. because yeah, work is like, it's like a wagon with wood on it, and it has a limited size, and you cannot, when it's full, you cannot put in more there. It's concrete wood. And usually if you debate enough about it, they usually will let you be, or they will say, yeah, okay, we can give this task actually to someone else, or it's okay when you don't do this task. But you have to kind of debate. There's no way around this. Okay, good. So we got through with the specific solution section, which I'm happy about. I kind of had these two things planned, but it very much looks like we won't have time for any of them. So there will also be no poll. So we can start with the questions. But at least I got the Irish prayer in. That was kind of important.
So, questions? Well, I'm gonna start.
Okay, yeah.
So, there cannot be too much home office.
I have just one observation. When you are...
Wait, hold on.
I have just one observation that if you are like React and inexperienced, and someone just says like, we need this to be taken to that department, and you want to like stand up to it, and you remember and says, okay, I will do it. I will go there. So you will go there. But the next time they will expect you to do it. So do not take necessarily the unnecessary work you don't have to do, because you will end up overworked. Always work to the extent they pay you. That's the thing which I encountered myself, and I would like to warn you about if you start working like full time and getting paid money for the things you can do.
Yes, thanks a lot. And I agree 100%. That's also true. Like there's lots of more things like you see, because yeah, it's a huge field and a lot of stuff we do. Obviously this talk could be 4 hours, but it's very true. And those are the things that I included. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds a bit like colleague is here hinting into the burnout. What's your take on it? Like,
it depends a bit like what exactly you mean. I mean, actually burnout is a problem that all my stuff here avoids. Maybe I should have mentioned that also. Like, is your question more like how realistic is it? Or is your question...
Oh, I think our public here is mostly engineers. I think maybe what's your take on, you know, how to avoid falling into this trap and...
Okay, okay. I think of all the people, I think, yeah, we are risked of burnout. I think we are medium risk. I think the jobs that are highly risk are usually nurses and the medical fields. For them, it's worst. But for us, it's like middle. So about, yeah, how to not fall into burnout. I think a lot of the things I already said in the last 1.5 hours already help. Like, it's really important to, I think, get this internal boundary and the ability to say no. And I think it's mostly a self-care thing, which was kind of the main thing I wanted to get across. It's really important that you are aware that you are your own person and you have to look for your own needs first, and you are allowed to look for your own needs first. It's first you, then it should be your partner, your friends, and only then it's the company. If you put the company before yourself, you will get burnout, period.
More questions? Oh, there we have some.
You said that there are, or you talked about bad metrics, like lines of code and support calls. Do you think that there are any good metrics for measuring productivity? Or?
Whew. That's a very good question. Like there's some research on metrics, and you can measure so many different things, but no, not really. I think there's not really a metric, not for this. Like there is this problem, like very often, like requirement engineering is extremely important. Like understanding early what the project will need. And like sometimes it's super productive to delete code actually. Or like I once had this where I worked at a company that does notebooks, and their sound was broken. Like they sold notebooks with no sound. And I took like 2 months to understand the audio driver. And then I did change in one line, I think 5 characters or something like that, and then recompiled everything, and that made sound work again. And for the company, this was huge, and like a lot of money that actually they had working sound. But like in lines of code, it was like one line in 2 months. And like, and also it varies a lot, like how much money stuff makes. Like this was kind of important, but it could also be like if I fixed the whole thing 4 months later, I would still have done the same work, but this company would already been bankrupt and it would not benefit them anything. So like usually stuff translates to financial benefit in the end, but financial benefit depends on so much weird things that we have no control over. Like sometimes you do a great product and it sells great, and then another time you do a great product, but month before you, another company did a product that's a little bit worse, but it was a month earlier, so no one buys your product. And all this contact facts also kind of is relevant for the productivity or for how to value work. And like, since there is so much random noise there, I don't think there can be a good metric for this stuff.
If I may interject,
Oh, yeah, okay.
here is my take on this. There is something called Goodhart's law. And it basically says once you start using some metric to make strategic decisions, it stops being good metric. I think good example is the one with the Amazon phone calls, for example, because if you don't tell people that their salary depends on how many phone calls they make, as long as they don't know it, it might be actually usable metric. But once they know, that the hang-ups and the stuff you are describing starts happening and so on. So yeah, well, any other questions?
Since we're now in the story part, I also want to mention that before I forget. There was also this thing, I think when the Britons were in Australia, they had a problem that there were too many snakes. So they introduced a metric that everyone who brings them a dead snake gets some money. Which like, yeah, we solved the snake problem, but then all the locals started breeding their own snakes just to deliver them more snakes. And then they realized, okay, this doesn't work, and they abandoned the law, and then all the locals just released their snakes into the outside, and then there was even more snakes. And I think this is also a great example of why your metrics don't work. Yeah, Bala, sorry.
Questions?
It's actually also very different what I expected. I also did more or less the same talk at the Chaos Communication Congress. And there I got a lot of questions like, yeah, I have the same problem here, I have the same problem there, but I really like my company and my boss is so nice, how can I do this softer? It's very interesting that no one here has this question here. But this might be different culture. Okay.
So I do have a question.
Oh.
So I think you kind of also pointed out into the the work-life balance, but also there cannot be too much home office. I think this is a bit of a contradiction, at least for me, because I'm in a situation where if I do not have to, I don't have to go anywhere. But I started renting office just so I have a place to go to kind of have this routine. Do you think it actually, do you really stand behind your opinion there cannot be too much home office, or is it just how you set it up in your mind and then it should just work?
It's the second thing, really, I would say. So it's just how you set it up in your mind, and maybe this is also something that doesn't work for everything. I hope I set enough qualifiers there that many of these things are psychological variations between individuals. So what I do for this is I have my time tracking in Emacs. Like I have a key binding that I press in my Emacs when I start working, and then the clock works and I'm in work mode. And when I do a break, a longer break, or I stop working, I do Control-C, Control-X, Control-O for clock out.
That's an Emacs person here.
Yeah. And then my brain also switches off work mode. And that works pretty well for me. So this might help some people to really bind this to something. And to me, it's an Emacs key binding and my Emacs time bookkeeping. But I do know that there are lots of people like you, actually, who either don't have Emacs or really don't. It's not enough for them, and they need the place change. And for them, Office might help. There is, it's unfortunately, but also luckily, people are different. That's also one reason why socialism didn't work. People are pretty different, and what works for me might not work for others.
I guess I will give Emacs a chance then.
Ooh, yeah. So yeah, it's this clocking. This comes with Emacs org mode, and org mode is a part of the default Emacs. So if you are on Ubuntu or Debian and just do apt install Emacs, you also get that clocking.
Questions? No other Emacs people? We still have 20 minutes. But I think you could use some spare time, right?
It is so. I could use, I mean, for me, for getting my train and everything, it would be perfect like to leave 10 minutes early. The question is,
so can you, if you want, you can use the last 10 minutes to kind of give us some horrible examples. I think that could really be, what do folks say?
Actually, the thing that I would like most is to tell a bit more about all these laws and these scientific things I had mentioned. But I mean, since the questions were shorter this time, we could also like ask, is it back here? Ask the audience, like, what are you people more interested in? Who of you, so there will be 3 options before you raise your hands. One is leaving earlier, one is the general solution, and one is this like scientific patterns of work stuff. Who is interested in the general solutions? 1, 2. Who is interested in these like patterns and the scientific stuff? That's more, okay. And who's interested in leaving earlier? Oh, okay, that's cool. Okay, then we will do this, which is nice because I also have this. It's my favorite. So these are some psychological laws behind that stuff that I found super interesting. And one is called reciprocity styles. Like reciprocity is basically if someone gives you something, you feel the desire to give him something back and to return it. And that's something that's international. Most people have it. But the thing is, there are different styles of like how much reciprocity humans want to give and how much they feel. And that's pretty important once you work together with other people on a project. And there's a pretty interesting study by Fischbacher that has also been reproduced by others, so it's pretty surely true. And what we found is that around 50% of humans are conditional cooperators, which means when other people work hard, they also work hard. But when other people are lazy, they also work lazy. So they adapt their work ethic to what they see from others, and they always return as much as they get. But they can get pretty lazy. And then 30% of humans are actually free riders. That means those are the people who do as little as possible. And 30% is a lot. And then around 10% are altruists, or like people who are highly conscientious. Like those are those who really get unhappy when they see something done bad, or who like really have a high desire to do things well and to do proper work. And these are also obviously the ones that are most likely to get burnout. And also 10% in the study were like unclassifiable regarding this. And it's kind of important to understand this, and when you have colleagues, to be aware who is who of your colleagues, and also to be aware that you these 30% of free riders that are there, you cannot change them. But what is also interesting from the study, what they said, is like these conditional cooperators, like how much they work, depends actually like on how visible the free riders are. Like when it's very visible that there are free riders that get away with being very lazy, that is also very frustrating for everyone, but it's also frustrating for these 50% moralists. And then they are, okay, when they get away with it, I will be lazy too. And that's pretty dangerous for a company. And companies can go into this state where like the 30% free riders and the 50% conditional cooperators all get into the bare minimum mode. And I think sometimes state jobs are like that, maybe. And yeah, it might also be interesting for yourself to see who of these are you. I think I'm somewhere in between this moralist and altruist thing. And yeah, and usually like being highly conscientious doesn't get you that much. So I think it's always good to go more into the chill direction with these things. Okay. This is something I think Aristoteles said, that sometimes it's not the things that matter, but it's the opinions about things that matter. And that's very true. Like usually when humans have to make decisions, or you are in a group or in a team or in a company with other humans, and humans make decisions, it's really important. It's not really about facts, but it's about what people think about these facts, what will ultimately guide their decisions, and also then what happens in this project. And yeah, important, and there's also this, you might think that your opinions are facts, but pretty often there's also a lot of subjectivity on your side. And so yeah, facts don't care about feelings and feelings don't care about facts. Actually, both are in a complicated long-distance relationship. And it's kind of important to understand this, because that also means arguing too long and too much about technical details won't get you anywhere. All the social stuff and how long you are there is actually more important. And regarding that, yeah, I think after time I want to tell you the story of Ignaz Semmelweis, which is pretty important. So he was an Austrian guy, I think 200 years ago. And he was a doctor. And he worked in a pretty big hospital where they had the thing that a lot of pregnant women who gave birth to children died quickly after that. And they also made the observation they had basically 2 different rooms for giving birth. And in one the doctor worked, and in the other the midwives worked. And the thing is, in the ones where the doctors worked, I think 3 times as many women died than in the ones where the midwives worked. And this was for a long time ignored because all the doctors were very proud at this time and didn't want to admit this, so it was first covered up. This is what I mentioned, this we don't talk about problems. And then when Ignaz Semmelweis started looking at this, he tried out like observe how different they worked. And one thing he realized is that the midwives, they washed their hands before they started working, and the doctors didn't. And even worse, the doctors very often in the morning, they looked at corpses of dead people, then did not wash their hands, and then started helping the women giving birth. And he realized maybe it would be good if they washed their hands and ordered them to do it. And it worked. And he had kind of proven that. And then he was like, yeah, that's kind of important that we fix that. And he told that people, but the interesting thing was, no one wanted to hear that. Like back at that time, the doctors really didn't like the message that their hands are dangerous or that their hands are poisonous in a way. So whenever he told that people or he went to conferences, he was like met with lots of criticism and lots of dislike, although he had like proof and facts for his thesis. And what this guy then did, because he was a very disagreeable person and a very stubborn person, he just pushed on and just started screaming, debating with people, getting more and more angry about no one understanding this, which is kind of relatable because it is important, it's about lives. But in the end, they pushed him into a psychiatric ward because he was getting angry and angry about this, and no one kind of wanted to listen to him. So yeah, and I think there he died a few years later. Actually, he had a wound that someone was then treating that didn't wash his hands, and he died of that, which is pretty ironic and bad. So the reason why I'm telling this is like a very extreme example of facts don't matter. Like this guy, even though he kind of knew he was right, he should have accepted, yeah, in this reality, I won't get anywhere. Like, you can maybe look for allies in that fight, and maybe you have to accept that you have to work on this very slow, and it might take 10 or 20 years to change it. But overall, it's about how much people want to listen to you, and not how about your facts, and not about proof. And I think this is not only true for hospitals, but kind of for everywhere. And this might be a not so fun note, but I think it's important to understand that because that's how humans are. That's already something I told. I think that's in a way, that's also a sad fact, but it's also in a way relaxing to know that all the others also fail. What also do I have? I also mentioned that the fact that your managers really don't understand what you're doing has advantages and disadvantages. Like it means some other people can tell them whatever and get allowance to do that, but it also means you can tell them whatever you want. It also means that very often you have to think before you talk to your manager how you sell basically your proposal and your idea. And also they are kind of happy when you don't buffer them with too many technical details. Like it's better when you can provide a good summary and you're a good communicator. And this might also help you to be promoted if that's something you want. Oh, okay, that will be the last one for today. So Parkinson's law was also super interesting. So Parkinson was a guy in England. I think it was a mathematician. And he realized that there were companies, I think it was a boat-making company, and he observed how many people worked at this company and how many boats this company was producing. And the fun thing was, and I think this was a time where like over 10 or 15 years, where there were years where England was at war, so they needed to produce lots of boats. And then England was not at war, so they needed no boats or very little. So the amount of boats they produced was like actually going up, going down, going up, going down again. But the fun thing is the amount of employees in that company just kept going up slowly. And it was totally independent of the number of actually boats this company produced. And he then looked at other companies and realized it's always the same. Like companies like to grow slowly, and also departments and teams, their natural way of existing is growing slowly, and it's totally independent from the actual output and from the actual productivity. And what he encountered was like reasons are managers always like to have more people under them because then they can feel better. And they do not care so much if it's really necessary. Like they will always find a reason to get another guy in their team or another girl. Back then it was mostly guys, but yeah. And also the thing is like, if you do some work and then this work kind of falls away or you suddenly have to do a lot less, would you tell your manager, I'm basically doing nothing, please fire me? No, like no one does this. People either like just do nothing or they find some ways to make this little stuff they do look important, or they do bureaucracy and they introduce new bureaucracy. That's something German companies are very good at. And so there's also a formula behind that I forgot, but like basically the thing of Parkinson's law is it is pretty possible that in many companies people are who are not really necessary to the output of the company, but they are there because of this organic growth, and then they don't want to go away, obviously. And that's also why sometimes companies die or crash. Yeah, and that's kind of interesting to know, too. Okay,
Well,
so now.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It was pretty nice. Round of applause for Richard.
Oh,